Hey everyone, it's Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series between writers. I am having so much fun recording these episodes, and I if you've been listening, I get a range of different people on here, but I particularly like when I get newer writers, writers who are just having their debut or are aspiring to have a debut, because I like to see kind of that journey that they've taken, and also, what cycle in all the rejection letters are they at, because there are usually a lot of them, because I think so much of writing is a struggle, and so much of it's about persevering through that struggle. And so I love when I get debut authors on who are kind of at that cusp of like, wow, all of this, and I'm getting a book published. So today on the show, I did have a newer writer on, Leanne Kale Sparks. So Leanne, had a brief stint in, short career, we'll say, in law. And then she decided to get out the typewriter. Well, not a typewriter. She started to write books, is what I'm trying to say. That's just returning to a love that she had. And her new book, the first in a series, is called The Wrong Woman, a novel, which is currently out. So I highly recommend you check it out. But it was great talking to her and hearing about that journey and what she's learned along the way, and what she sees as the trajectory. So fascinating to talk to. I really had a good time speaking with her. Please enjoy my conversation right now with Leanne Kale Sparks. So how are you? Nice to meet you.
I am good. Nice to meet you too.
Where are you?
I am in Fort Worth, Texas, but I am originally from Colorado.
Oh, yeah, I think I saw that nearby. Where? Because that's where I am.
I was born and raised in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
Where are you at?
I'm up just outside of Boulder. I'm in Boulder County, in eastern Boulder County, in a little tiny city called Erie.
I actually do know that city.
Oh, do you?
I do. I don't know if I've ever been there, but I have heard of it.
Yeah, I've been here for, like 25, 26 years now. So, but that's
about as long as I've been gone.
Do you have good memories of growing up in Colorado?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I don't think I appreciated it nearly as much. And
Sure.
ever since I left, I've been fighting to get back there. And I married a guy in the Navy. So that kind of made it, semi-impossible while he was in the Navy to do that. So
yeah.
We'll get back up there eventually. I was there in the middle of May. So just over a month and a half ago, doing a book signing. And oh gosh, my best friend came with me, and she lives in Austin. I live in Fort Worth, and we just had a blast. And she's ready to move to Colorado. I'm ready to move back to Colorado. Everybody's ready to move back to Colorado. So.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, it's like everywhere else, right? Like after a while, you're like, there's too many people, and what happened to this, but everyone always complains no matter where you live. So I
was driving around Colorado Springs even. I was just like, where am I? I mean, you always know where you are because of the mountains, but
yeah, Colorado Springs is now kind of a sprawl. It's huge, and it.
Oh yeah. So. I mean, where they're out east, where they're building all these new communities and stuff, that was like, people didn't go out there. I mean, Peyton, you didn't go to Peyton. That was like,
right.
It was like way out there in the middle of the boondocks, So now that it's like considered part of Colorado Springs is kind of funny.
But your formative years were in Colorado.
In Colorado Springs, yeah.
Okay.
And moved around extensively you'd think we were military within Colorado Springs, but my mom kind of she liked new houses. So we moved around. I went to 2 different elementary schools, 2 different middle schools, junior high schools there, and 2 different high schools. So moved a lot.
And then the family was just cool with like, okay, mom wants to move a mile down the road now.
Yeah. No, we didn't really have it. We were told, okay, we're moving, and it'd be like, what? Huh. You got to keep the house clean because we're trying to sell it. So,
but there was no there was no need to, except for the fact that she just wanted to be somewhere different.
Yep.
Even,
Yep.
huh. But that kind of wreaks havoc a little bit on kids, right? Like you said, two different elements. You're trying to establish relationships with the kids, and
yeah. Which is why you would think I would know with my own kids that, gosh, moving them around and making them start new schools and stuff, that's not cool. And yet, if you're a married guy in the military and was like, suck it up, I did it.
But that's out of kind of a necessity rather than whim.
Well, the necessity part might be questionable with my mom. She was like, it was a necessity. I needed to move.
Right. Exactly.
But
so, and you have siblings?
I'm the youngest and I'm the only girl. So I have an older brother that lives over in Australia, and then two brothers that were twins, but one's passed away. So and then there's me.
Yeah. Okay.
Little me, and I have two kids and two stepkids. So
and what was your dad doing when you were?
My dad had the coolest job ever. My dad worked for Estes, which is the model rocket company.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very familiar. I used to do model rockets with my kids. We'd go out and launch them. And that's kind of the only name that I don't know if there's any other model rocket company. I'm sure there is.
Not
they
any
make
good
all the
one.
engines.
Yep. They're black powder engines. I remember the one time that there was a big problem with the black powder, and my dad we lived in Colorado Springs, and he had to go down to Penrose, which is south of Colorado Springs. And it was big issues with OSHA and stuff like that, because it was almost a big explosion, but it turned out
at the manufacturing facility.
Yeah. So where the manufacturing facility was, it was a few. The reason they put it in Penrose is because it is in the middle of nowhere and there's not a lot of people. And so it was, if you ever drive down, I can't remember the highway that goes to Pueblo from like Canyon City, and you see these big humps. That's where all the black powder is stored. They're in underground kind of bunkers along the road. So
for 4th of July, would your dad just bring home like all these engines and you just light them and see where they would go?
We always had engines around. It was funny because when he passed away, he would take like, old bank boxes that you get your checks in, or shoe boxes and stuff, and he'd put like odds and ends in there. I was still finding Estes rockets and igniters and stuff. Yeah, they were just a part of my childhood. They were everywhere. So
that is a cool job.
Yeah.
And then were you seeing any or feeling any sparks of creativity, or where does the writing kind of gene come from for you?
Well, so like I said, I'm the only girl and I was the youngest, so I had to fight to kind of get in with my brothers and play and stuff. And so a lot of times they didn't want their baby sister around. So I was in my head a lot and had lots of imaginary friends, and I had stories, and I had, so I was always really creative about how I was, when I played and stuff. And I always had stories. I never wrote them, but I would draw pictures. And it's amazing. My kids are really fabulous artists. I was not. So I had a lot of stick figure drawings of my stories, but I never actually started writing them until I was in college. So.
And I find that interesting because it's similar kind of with my family is I have a lot of creative people in my family, but they're mostly in the artistic expression side. So, painters, and my daughter can just naturally, I mean, she's not amazing, but she can draw much better than I can.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's all part of the same kind of slice of creativity, however it manifests itself. It's creation gene.
It's wonderful because, the oldest girl, my oldest daughter, I say, she's almost 30, but she's also a fabulous writer. She's getting her PhD right now in creative writing, and she's in Nottingham, so she's really cool. She's so much cooler than I am. So, yeah, but she was really good with painting and charcoal. And then the second daughter is an architect, but she's really good with like pencils and she does painting.
Fine
also,
attention to detail. I'm
sure. Really.
Yeah.
And then the youngest daughter is into photography. So she's really good at it. So I've got my house is an art gallery. I love it. I have all their pictures up and framed and all over the place, and it's great.
And it's funny because like all these different realms of creativity, even when you're within that realm, it's so, for me, it's hard to imagine doing another thing. And people are like, how can you write a book? That's insane. I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't seem that hard, but to draw that picture or to create a song is unimaginable to me. Like, I don't know how you do that, but it's just weird how you just find your kind of niche and you're like, oh, I'm capable of doing this.
Well, I think even within writing, there's that, because I think you have to find your genre and your own voice, and that can be intimidating. I know I went through thinking, so I tried to learn the business writing romance, but we don't want to talk about that.
No, we're going to talk about that.
No, we're not going to talk about that. So I wrote romantic suspense, and I wrote the suspense part really great. And then I'd get to the end of the book and I'm like, oh, I forgot to put in the romance. And
so nobody had sex yet.
I know, nobody's had sex. And I hated that. I was like, oh, I hate this.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, maybe this isn't what I'm supposed to write. So I wrote this, the first draft of The Wrong Woman, a while ago. It was a short story, and I gave it to an author friend of mine that I trust, and she's like, this is what you're supposed to be writing. So it's even within that, trying to find your little niche and find your voice, and
it is. And it's also what makes you happy.
Yes.
I think it's so funny because you look at jobs, because I have a full-time job as well. And like, it's okay. I actually like it quite a bit. And I've done it for a long time. Mm-hmm. But when I think about, I like, for example, like the people, and not necessarily like, the belief
job part.
Yeah. But like when I think about sitting down to write, I get excited because it brings me joy. It's like not, that's not to say it's not work. It's hard for sure.
Hard.
But I look forward to it. And I think when you're talking about finding your voice and finding your genre, it's almost like you don't want to overthink it because it'll come to you. I naturally started writing, thriller suspense, and I didn't even know I was writing thriller suspense. That's what my agent told me, and I didn't know what I was doing. She's like, I'm like, okay, I just like this story where, kind of dark things are happening. But it sounds like that same to you. It's like,
darker the better.
Yeah, you maybe had a little bit of a commercial mindset starting out, and then like, no, I got to get pulled to what I gravitate to, whether that's commercial or not. It's what brings you joy. And for some of us, writing really dark shit brings us joy.
I know. It's really, it's odd because whenever I'm watching something, my husband and I were watching some show the other night, and there was like entrails involved, and I'm like, ew, gross. And then I'm like, oh, you know what you could do though? You could take those and you could do this and you could do that. You could maybe like strangle somebody with those. Oh, I gotta use this in a book. And it's just like, my husband just sits over there and he just looks at me. But after this point, he's just like, all right, whatever. But I mean, there's still a little bit of, I hope that he wants to talk to Google Home. He's like, you heard that, right? Something happens to me.
Right.
Somebody heard that, right?
But it's, and I still contend that like, thriller, suspense, mystery writers, horror writers, even, it's not like we're weird. You go to Thriller Fest and it's like the nicest, loveliest group of people you'll ever meet in your life. And, I think everybody, across, the planet has very dark thoughts and dark imagination. It's just however that ends up manifesting itself. For us, we write about it. Other people might think about it, or they might enjoy watching those shows.
Or they
ask us like what happened. Yeah, or read our books, and they're like, well, why are you so dark? I'm like, you're the one reading it.
Yeah, you just gave me a 5-star review. What does that say about you?
Right. And I think, for me, I enjoy the conflict, but I enjoy kind of imagining what I would do in that situation. I like to take somebody who is not necessarily equipped with highly, defined skill sets. I don't write about, military figures or anything like that. And then bad things happen to them. And then how are you going to deal with it? But let's back up a little bit. So you did not go to school for creative writing or...
So my undergraduate, I did.
Okay.
And then that was back before, there was all this, everybody can publish. And there was a lot more, books involved. And it was really hard to get an agent and even harder to get a publishing contract. And at the time,
is, though.
Yeah, it still is. But you have that whole self-publishing route that you can go to. So there's a little bit more options open. Not easy options, but options. But at that time I thought, well, I need to be able to make a living. So I decided to go to law school, and I love the law. I mean, I totally love the law. I do miss, yes, I was one of those crazy people that watched the Johnny Depp trial only because it was a trial on TV and it was the real trial. And so I
Right.
get into that nerdy stuff. So I do love the law, and I do miss, being in a courtroom. But that's also my husband's fault because, that whole Navy moving around thing,
Yeah.
he didn't choose his states well. So I constantly was having to take the bar exam over, and that's not a fun thing to do. So
yeah, I wouldn't think so.
Yeah. I went back to my love of writing and just took it from there. So I had a very brief career in law.
But that's still, I mean, I think it's worth mentioning. That's still, it's not necessarily like, how do I want to put this? That you could quit and be like, okay, I'm going to just totally support myself writing right now. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Right.
So it does help to have kind of a family unit where you're having, income coming from different sources, because it's, and your daughter who's studying writing right now, it's like, she can learn from you about the business side of it. And it's like, if you think you're going to make $1 million on your first book,
you're not.
Yeah. If you think you're going to make $10,000 on your first book, that'd be pretty good too. So
you're going to hope for that.
Yeah. So
so with her, she is aware of that. She has learned that from me a lot. And so she's getting her PhD so that she can teach, because she can teach. I couldn't teach anything. I have no patience, but she's really good at it. And so, but she's like, okay, that's how I'm going to support myself while I'm doing this whole writing thing too. And if it translates into her being able to write, full time, then that's that. But I definitely was lucky. I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I don't want to try this bar exam stuff again. I don't want to try and do this again. I think I want to write. And my husband, God bless him, he was like, okay. I mean, that's basically been his answer to everything that I've wanted. I'm not going to write in this genre anymore. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to, I'm going after this contract or that contract. He's always like, okay.
Now, what do you ever think about, like, if you didn't have that extra support system, what your path now, how it would have looked differently? Do you think you would have stayed in law?
Oh yeah. If I couldn't have supported myself with the writing, I would have probably continued to do the law and try and write on the side.
Yeah.
Which, which would have been difficult, but I know it's doable, but it would have been difficult. But if I were on my own, I guess that would be a way to do it.
Yeah. And it depends on what that other profession is. I would think, if I don't know anything about being a lawyer, but I would think like being a lawyer is, to me, sounds like long hours and you're exhausted, and it would, so I mean, for 20 years, I've been juggling both, and you just learn, okay, you schedule it. And for me, it's an hour a day, as is, working out in the morning. So it's, and you make sure it's just part of your life, and you prioritize it so that, you're not sacrificing other major things, but that you're not doing it just when you feel like it, because you won't get it done. And there's sometimes it's really hard to do. And some days I miss, but overall you can, I think if you have a passion for it, you can figure it out, just as if you had a passion for exercise or something like that.
Well, and I sometimes wonder if you continue to have that strong of a passion when it isn't your full-time job, because like with me, it's my whole job. I mean, I get to decide when I want to write all day and what I want to do all day. And sometimes it's it's hard for me to go, okay, sit down and write. This is your job. And so it becomes kind of like God, I gotta go upstairs and I gotta write. I really have to sit down and write. And when you know you don't have that, that you have all day to get a
Right.
couple of hours of writing in or your word count in, then I sometimes wonder if I would be more of a disciplined writer and have more of a love of it than but I mean, not that I don't have a love of it, because I do. Every time I love sitting down and writing, but
Yeah, I totally
I
get
do
what you're
allow
saying.
myself to get blocked. I allow myself to get blocked, if you believe in that, a lot easier, and I use it as a crutch. So
Yeah, I totally believe that. I mean, I think if I were writing full time, first of all, I wouldn't be able to write, 4 or 5, 6 hours a day. I would have to build that muscle, because I don't have that much muscle. My muscle is fine tuned to the habit that I display now. But I totally understand that. And there are times, even when you only have an hour a day, it's like, sometimes you're like, ugh, you're not in the mood. And there might be, it's the passion part always manifests itself interestingly with me, because I might be sitting upstairs writing, not into it, just sitting there thinking. And then after like 15 minutes, like something kind of turns on a little bit, and it's just a thought. And then all of a sudden you're writing where you couldn't 15 minutes ago imagine doing that. And like, that's the passion, because something turned on where you didn't think it was going to, and all of a sudden you're excited, and the next 45 minutes flies by. That's a beautiful thing to me when that happens.
Fun. That is the best, when it finally kicks in and you're like, oh, there it is, and you just go. And it's usually for me it's music, like a soundtrack or something that I'm listening to.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What do you tend to listen to when you're writing?
Well, I'm old school, so typically it'll be like, the book that I'm starting on now, I'm doing. Okay, so can you edit things out, or is this just like totally?
I can totally, yeah.
Okay. Do you mind if I stop for just a second and yell at my husband to close his door so we don't have?
So where were we?
We were talking about the music that I listen to.
Oh yeah, you said you're old school.
I am old school. So this morning I was on my Peloton, and I put on Vision Quest, the Vision Quest soundtrack. That's how old school. And it just was like, all of these ideas started coming in, and I'm like, and it's great because it's typically usually like 1 or 2 songs, and then I'll put them in my own playlist so that I can just, have them on constant play. And then the nice thing about Spotify is that it'll recommend other music that's similar. So that's a good feature for me.
Yeah, I listen to just ambient sounds, like the app Calm has a lot of good ones. There's a great one, just cornfield. It's just the sound of like wind through a cornfield. And there's like, even I'll listen to like, graveyard ones when I'm like writing a really scary scene, and that kind of gets me in the mood. But I can't have words, because that all of a sudden I'll get focused on the words, and it distracts me.
Well, that's where we're like. So I can listen to the music with the words to get ideas. And when I'm in that brainstorming and trying to get into writing, that's where I listen to the words, the songs with the words. But as soon as the writing starts kicking in, Brain FM, man, I'm all there with all the ambient sounds too. I'm
thunderstorm sounds. I love those.
That's the only thing I can write to. I used to be able to write to classical, but even that I've kind of switched off of, and the ambient music is way better. The binaural kind of things,
binaural
those are
beats
great
and stuff.
Yeah, those are great.
So I want to ask about your progression with your publishing career. So you started The Wrong Woman as a short story, and then you developed it into a novel. But from what I understand, it's the first in a series. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. There's a 4 to 6 book plan series, but right now there's just 2 books that I've contracted for. So I'm waiting for the follow-on contract. So it sounds like it was an easy road for me, and I've heard a lot of horror stories from people. So me going into traditional publishing I wrote it. but at the time I was doing this silly little, I want to learn the business, I'm going to write romance under a pen name. And so I self-published that because I got impatient. And if there's anything any sort of advice I can give to new writers, it's be patient. Self-publishing is hard. If you don't like all of the extra stuff with the marketing and the, everything that goes into actually putting a book out there, I couldn't do it. I wasn't good at the marketing stuff and things like that. And so it wasn't an area I wanted to write in either.
Let me interrupt you just for a second, because I'm curious to know, because that's a good story, because you have kind of perspective from both angles of getting published. And it sounds probably like it was fortunate that you wrote your suspense romance under a pen name, because, it's out there, whether it's ready to be out there or not. And when you go to Crooked Lane or whomever, they can go look at sales if you happen to have published under the same name and be like, why did you do this? And now it's going to make it harder for us to buy this. Do you feel like, and patience is a great word, and it's not just patience of like things take a long time. It's also patience to like, as a writer, maybe you're not ready to be published yet.
Right.
And that's your practice book, or your practice, my first 3 books didn't sell. Did you, looking back on it now, were you like, yeah, that book wasn't ready to be out in the world? Or were you like, yeah, it's a good book, it was just a lot of work doing the self-publishing aspect?
It was a good book. I think like everything, when you're just starting out and you're writing a book and it's your first book, if you go back and read your first book and what you're reading now, hopefully you're like, ooh, right. Because that means that you've learned and you've progressed in your writing along the way. And if you ever think that you've learned everything about writing, you're wrong, and you should stop, because you should always be learning. That's just the way it is. But I think that it was a good book. And if I had just calmed down and sent it out more than, the 3 or 4 or 5, 10 times that I sent it out and got, no thanks on it, and then kept working on it. But I had a friend that was like, oh, you could just self-publish it. That's what I did with my first book. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's what I did. And I regret that in some ways, because I think that if I just slowed down a little bit, but then again, who knows? I am where I am because of those experiences. I learned that self-publishing isn't for me. I tried, and then I kept going on because I was like, I don't know how to switch over, and I don't know how to switch over. And finally, if you don't know who Becca Syme is, go and find her. She's awesome. She's like a coach, and authors love her. And she asks a very pivotal question of, but is it? but do you need to be? I'm like, so I'm in the middle of this series. It's supposed to be a 13-book series in this military romantic suspense, and I'm only on book 6. And so I've got all these other books to write. And she's like, are you in a contract? And I'm like, no, I just, I've planned all these books out. And she's like, okay, but do you have to write them? Do you have to publish them? And I'm like, no. And she's like, well, then why are you? Why don't you just stop and do what you want to, what you love to do? And so it happened to be my New Year's that year. It was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with this other life. And I pulled the wrong woman out of mothballs, and I expanded on it and sent it out to a bunch of people. And I had a bunch of editors take a look at it and get back to me. And then went on the search for an agent and didn't do too badly. Found one pretty quickly. I think by October I had an agent. September or October I had an agent, and by the following February I had a book contract.
Yeah, that's great. So, and it's funny if you take that out of context, as if you wrote this book and you got this agent and you got this book deal in that short period. It sounds like, oh my God, that's amazing. But the reality of it is you had years of rejection, whether it was self-imposed or not, before that. Yeah. And that becomes more the typical. I mean, so, and again, going back to that word patience, I think that's so smart that you said that. I had 75 agent rejections before I got my agent. And for me, what really helped was I didn't I didn't know what I was doing. I had no background in writing, so I had zero confidence, and that actually helped me because I'm like, well, of course you're rejecting me. I can't even believe you're reading my query letter. So
know,
it didn't make me feel like, oh my God, I'm so great. How is nobody recognizing this? So that just helped me to just focus on the writing. But I think, if there are people who just like this, my mother says this is a great book. I don't understand why nobody's buying this book. And, you get a little, delusional, and then you go the self-publishing route sometimes, and it's not ready. And, it's not for the best. So it's interesting that you've had both those perspectives going on.
Yeah.
So all of my stuff is standalone, and I just actually wrote an article about series versus standalone and why I prefer one over the other. But one of the realities of it, and so I'm curious to hear your perspective on this, is if you're a debut novelist and you have a book that you say, I envision a 4 to 6 book series with this character.
Right.
That's a big risk for the publisher, right? It's a big risk for the publisher to buy one book from you because you haven't established yourself yet.
Right.
And they don't know how that book is going to sell. So it's really hard to then say, we're going to commit to a 4-book series with you. What was your journey like with that?
Well, so when they first we sent them The Wrong Woman, and they came back, and the editor said, okay, we'd like to see what the synopsis for each of the books is, just short synopsis for each of the books.
So it was pitched as a series.
It was pitched as a series, and then they wanted the synopsis, and then they wanted to switch things around the way I had, like my book 2 that I proposed, they wanted to move to a book 4. And switch some things around. And so we were like, okay. And then they said, but here's the deal. We're only going to take the first 2 books. And so you kind of have to go with, okay, here's hoping they'll pick up the next one. And of course, it is a business for them. It's like, I have
totally,
I have good characters. I think, that's one of the consistent, reviews that I get is, and when people contact me, they love the characters. So, and I think that's good for a series. I think you can get away with a lot more in a story if people are in love with your characters.
Right.
But then I am sitting here with, I've submitted book 2, and now is the waiting time to see if they're going to pick up the next 2 books in the series, or the next 4 books, or what they're going to do, or one more book. But
getting them to commit to the first 2 instead of 1 is, it's a milestone. I mean, that's pretty impressive, and it shows, confidence on their side, but it also makes sense that that's all they're committing to right now. The other downside is, if your editor leaves, or you get orphaned, from what I understand, what's really hard to do is for another publishing house to pick up a series mid-series.
Oh yeah.
That's almost like, all right, I guess I'll think of something.
I've never even heard it happen before. I even asked my agent, and I've asked a couple of other people that are knowledgeable about such things, and they were like, publishing houses, because why would they want to? The money is in the backlist,
right? It's
not in, you get the upfront money when you first release, but it's really in people going and buying the backlist in the series. So why do they want to do that and put your books out there, and the other publishing house gets to reap the benefits of that, because everybody's buying the backlist, especially in my series, because a lot of times they'll do a series, but each one can be a standalone. Mine aren't like that. Mine are a progression. They're definitely a progression. So,
even the series books where it's technically a standalone, if you're reading book 3, because I've done this before, I'll read book 3 of somebody's and not have read the first 2, and they say it's a standalone, but there's so many references that, I'd like to know. I can tell there's a whole story here that this is, and it kind of gets under my skin a little bit, because I don't want that, because it's very hard to do, to your point. And it's almost cleaner, like how you're doing it is like, no, this is start with book 1 and go in order.
Well, there's, even if you say it's a standalone in a series, there's a progression of relationships and how your relationship builds, because it's not a brand new relationship each book, or else it's a standalone.
Right.
I mean, it's not a series. And so, the person that you meet in book one, the characters there that follow into book two, book three, book four, their relationships build like relationships do. They get more comfortable around each other, they fall in love, or they have children, or they get married, or whatever, or they break up, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Or somebody's died. There was a close relationship and somebody died, and then they refer to that and you're like, oh, I really wish I had kind of the meat of that relationship so I could appreciate how broken this is making this person. But I don't. All I know is that they love this person, but I don't know anything about this person.
I never understand when people ask, well, can you read it? Can you read it out of order? Or do you have to read it in order? And I always say, if it's a series, you got to read it in order. I don't care if they're standalones. They think they're standalones. You got to read it in order to get the full effect, or else you're just not you're going to read it and you're going to be like, what's the big deal about this author? Because you didn't take the journey. You didn't take the journey with it. So,
but it's funny too, because if you write a 7-book series, say, that might take you 5-6 years, depending on what your publishing schedule is. Yeah, your writing style and your ability and your growth will probably change over that period of time. So you say, go back and read book one, and you might be like, that's actually not my best book because I'm so much better of a writer by book 7. But everything changes constantly. And it is weird when people ask questions like, well, what, even with my 8 books that they're all standalone, which one should I read? And I never almost ever choose any of the first 3, even though I think they're great. But I'm just like, I don't know, I haven't looked at them in a while, but I'm probably a better writer now, so read something. I don't know, but maybe they would prefer, so I don't know, you lose a lot of confidence.
I went back to one of the first books that I wrote in a series under another name, and oh my gosh, I was just appalled because it was I would switch POVs, point of view of the characters, mid paragraph. I mean, it'd be like I was head jumping all over the place, and I was like, no wonder nobody wanted this. But I'll tell you what, I did submit that one to a publisher, and she got back to me, and she was harsh. She was harsh, but I really appreciated it, because the thing that she said to me was, I could care less about your characters. I'm not connected with them. I don't care about them. I don't care if she dies in the avalanche. I just don't care. And it's like, ooh. And so, but from then on, my characters, I have made sure that my stories are very character and dialogue driven, so that you get a sense of who they are and what they are, and their personality comes through right off the bat. So, and that's something that was the best.
And that's not always an easy thing to even when you're aware of it, it's not always, because we all have our strengths and weaknesses as writers.
Right.
And I approach my writing always from a place of emotion. Like I just want to feel. I want to feel what is this character sensing? What are they, who knows what the emotion is, but it's not like this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. It's like, no, this happened, and then this is how they reacted to it. And I think for me, that lets me kind of make them more human, make it more character driven than plot driven, but maybe at the sacrifice of plot. But it's just what I like. So, and that's changes over time as well.
Yeah. I'm definitely like a character where you can really kind of get into who they are, because are they the type of character where something bad happens and they fall apart, or they feel it deeply, or are they the type that they feel it so much that they make a joke about it? Do they have to constantly make a joke about what they're seeing? I love exploring the dynamics of people and putting those into a story.
And then there's extra pressure when you're talking about a series, right? Because I have a character now who might have, again, great skill sets, and it happens to be that these things keep happening to them because of their profession. So the plot, there's almost an endless supply of plot. But going to character, you explore a lot in your first book about that character, and you want them to still be able to grow, but it's more challenging because you've kind of like, you kind of laid it all out there and you're like, what else about this person that we can really delve into over the course of several more books and keep it, engaging to the reader. I would think that would be a challenge. I don't know what your sense is about that.
I like writing series, but there does come a time where it's like, okay, I don't know that I ever would want to do more than like 4, 5, 6 books in a series. I mean, there are writers out there who have, 18, 19 books with the same characters. And it's like, how could you do that? Because I get too bored with them. It's like, okay, what witty thing is Kendall going to say now? And so I think that I do like it because I like to build on the relationships and I like to come up with new and interesting ways for them to get into trouble. But I also really, I'd love to write like standalone psychological thrillers as well, just because I think that is something that would be really interesting. Just take a story and it's done. When it's done and those characters are gone.
Totally.
And you come up with something new, because that's the thing about being writers, is that we always have these little ideas poof 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 in our heads, and so there's so much that we can choose from that sometimes it's kind of like, why am I pigeonholing myself into these 2, 3 characters, one character? To why not expand out and find some new characters and find some new.
I totally agree. Yeah, I mean that's so exciting for me when I sit down and think about it. And like, there's a new location, there are new characters. I'm world building, and that's like that's exactly what you say. Like, you have so much to choose from that unless it's and sometimes maybe it's easier to be like, okay, this is the same city, the same characters, and I've established them, so I don't have to think. But I love the thinking it all up. Like, who is this person? Like, what do they look like? Like, that's so exciting to me. Like last night, I probably spent my entire hour of writing just thinking about, where's this going to take place? And Googling different towns. I'm like, ooh, that's a creepy little town. That could work. What are the winters like there? And you go down that rabbit hole. That's super exciting to me.
What are the houses like? Where do they live? Oh, they live on this street. Yeah.
Exactly.
I spend hours on Zillow looking up character, and which is funny because for when I went back and did the book signing in Denver, I had come up with, I had found an actual neighborhood, which I usually never do. I like to create my own cities and towns, because then nobody can say, oh, you did it wrong, or, have comments about where you place stuff. But I did find houses and things and work out where in the park and blah, blah, blah. And so I went on a hunt for these houses and actually found them.
Isn't that fun?
It was pretty fun. It was fun. It was like, awesome. Look, there's Kendall's house. And look, there's this person's house. And it was fun. And so people were standing there because I'd practically stop in the middle of the road. There it is.
Stalker.
Yeah, I know. I've got you on my ring cameras.
All right. Before we wrap up, we're going to do a little quick storytelling. So I got 3 books that I just chose off my bookshelves, and you're going to pick one of them, and we're going to pick a random sentence from a random page. I'm going to read that sentence, and then we just create a story on the fly. You give me a couple the next couple sentences, and I'll do a couple. We'll just do it for 2-3 minutes, and then I'll call an end to it. But it's always fun. It's always fun. So actually, this just came out yesterday. My buddy David, his new book, The Finalists, a thriller, The Unlikely Spy from Daniel Silva, and Stephen King's Bag of Bones. So choose one of those. Let's go with your friends.
Let's go with your friends.
Choose a page. It's so brand new. It's beautiful. Choose a page between 1 and 380.
276.
Okay. And then choose a sentence between 1 and 10.
7.
Okay, so I'm going to read this and just do whatever you want with it.
Okay.
She sighs, her eyes trailing over Nicholas's inert form on the floor.
She steps over him carefully so as not to disturb anything and wanders down the hallway to the bedroom.
She opens the drawer next to her bed and places the knife back in it. Of course, it was covered in blood and it had her fingerprints on it, but that was what she wanted. If she was going to escape, she didn't want to make it easy.
That was part of the game, part of the thrill. Anybody can kill and get caught. Anybody can cover their tracks and force the police to months of trying to find DNA and fingerprints. But to catch me, I'm going to let them. It's not so much that the cops can find me. The game is for me to outrun and outlast the investigation.
Of course, it didn't start off as a game. It was anything but. It started off as a series of instructions, and she had to remember that she still had to follow their rules. Even though it was exciting to think about she could do this on her own, she had to make sure to follow the instructions exactly because she dreaded the consequences. So she went back to her phone, opened up the email from that anonymous sender, and looked at step 2. It said simply, call the police and report the crime.
The question was, did she use her own phone or the house phone? And was she allowed to stay, or should she escape out the back door? She went into the kitchen and found one of the few remaining landlines. Why did people have landlines anymore? And called 911 and waited for the familiar 911, what is your emergency? And as calm as possible said, I have just killed someone, and put the phone down and calmly walked out the back door.
Then she had a momentary panic. She had completely forgotten about step 3. She looked at her phone and saw that it told her exactly what to say when she called 911. So she had to go back inside, ring again. She didn't know if it was the same operator or not. It could have been. But she said, my name is Jill Sparks.
My name's Jose Jimenez.
And I've just killed my husband. This is my address. And you can find me at the In-N-Out Burger on the corner of Sepulveda.
She picked up her keys to her vehicle and was amazed at how calm she was until she looked at her hand shaking as she tried to put the key in the ignition. What had she just done? She just killed her husband. Yeah, they were not on the best of terms lately, but it was her husband, the man that she had loved for the last 12 years, the man who had given her children. And that was the first time that she had remembered that her children were going to lose both of their parents.
Oh, I think we end it there.
Yeah.
On a nice dark note.
We need to write together.
Don't you like the idea that, maybe she wanted this to happen, and maybe like she is excited about the idea of trying to elude the police, but also that she's being forced to at the same time. Like there's some other organization there. Cool. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Like that.
There's something there.
Because there's such I always love to straddle that line between good and evil. And I think that, a lot of times in my book, Kendall struggles with how much she's an FBI agent, how much she kind of skirts the law. And there's what she's doing for the good of, other people. But if she wasn't, she would be a criminal in some of the things that she does. And so it's like there's such a gray area there. Right. I love the gray area.
Totally. And that the good of doesn't even have to be other people. It could just be the good of, this is what I feel like doing, even though I know kind of it's not morally acceptable, but I have my own impulses and it serves me, but I'm technically not an evil person by my definition. I love that too. Yeah. You're always doing something that you feel is right, and it's just how you define what right is intriguing. So great characters are the best.
So much in real life is, I think, people succumbing to that, where it was something that they wouldn't normally have done, but their emotions take over, and for them it's like, this is the only thing I can do. And then I always think about, I'm always watching these shows, and it's always this, what are you thinking afterwards? The regret and the, geez, I should have just not done this and things like that. So
totally. It's good stuff. Well, Leanne, what a pleasure! What a pleasure to talk to you, and congratulations on the release of The Wrong Woman. That's very exciting stuff. After years of writing different things, you found your calling.
I did. I love it. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Talk to you soon. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, that's it. That's my conversation with Leanne Kale Sparks. I really enjoyed that. And if you want to find out more about her, please go to her website, which is leannekale.sparks.com. Her new book is The Wrong Woman, the first in the series. I think you're going to love it. Check that out for sure. If you want to find out more about me, just go to my website, carterwilson.com. There you can sign up for my newsletter. You can track my events. You can write to me, say, what's up? Whatever you want to do. And you can watch all the episodes of Making It Up on there as well. That's it for now. More episodes coming out very soon. In the meantime, thank you as always for watching and or listening. Take care.